Thank you all so much for joining us for the General Professional Etiquette Workshop. Joining us today are Dr. Kyle Kahlberg, Executive Director for Strategy and Strategic Initiatives at the President's Office, and Dr. Lisa Davis, Associate Director of MBA Programs. They're going to be discussing workplace expectations and best practices in the areas of attire, verbal communication, time management, and professionalism. So I'm going to hand it over to them to get us started while I share the screen.
Great, thank you very much. I appreciate the welcome, and I'm delighted to be here with Dr. Davis today. We like to have the opportunity to speak to graduate students as well as all students across our campus. So thank you for being here today. So as this is being pulled up, take just a second here.
Are you able to see it?
I do see it, yes. And you can go ahead and advance. All right, so the portion that I'm going to talk about first, Lisa and I decided that mine would go first because it's a little bit more foundational and hers was a little bit more application. So I'm going to go over some of the basics with email etiquette, time management, and preparedness. Go ahead. So starting off with email etiquette, continue. So you have to ask yourself, why is it that you're using email? Is this the best form of communication to go about what it is you're trying to do? Especially in this day and age where it seems like our emails can be filled up with lots of correspondence, just make sure that this is the way you want to go about contacting whomever it may be. So first ask yourself, is your email name and address appropriate? Make sure you're not using an email address handle that says something like, Sunshine 2029 or something like that. Make it professional and something that will work well. Check to see if it's the best way to go about your request, and then think before you get your email ready, what else am I going to need to include? Because you don't want to be somebody who sends an email and then 2 seconds later says, oh yeah, I forgot about this, and then send something a little bit later. Okay, so think through what exactly it is you need. So in order to pull that together, I'm going to give you a scenario and we're going to walk through it. So you are excited to be at UNLV and you're ready to do some research. The Graduate College is hosting a fabulous research mixer and you are attending, and at that time you meet a professor who has interests aligned to yours. The professor says, shoot me an email, and the conversation ends. So first of all, the email is an appropriate thing to use, but now you have to make sure you do this in the best fashion possible. Okay, advance the slide. So, and if you'd click about 5 times, please. Great. Things to keep in mind: your subject, your greeting, body, and then the closing and signature. So with that, in your subject line, be sure it's something that is practical. A lot of professionals and people on campus get a lot of emails. And so we rely on those good subject lines that help us find emails, especially when we get busy and think, oh yes, I need to do this. What was the topic of that meeting? So be sure your subject line makes sense for what you're emailing about. Secondly, your introduction, your greeting line. With the greeting, look into the person that you're going to be emailing and be sure you use the appropriate title. Don't err on the side of being too informal. Err on the side of being more formal. I'm always happy to have people call me by my name, Kyle. But if I haven't met you and you just shoot me an email saying, hey, Kyle, it doesn't create the best first impression. In the body of it, you need to have an introduction. And in your introduction, be sure you have your first and last name, your class standing, your major, and the purpose that you are contacting that person. Then you would want to have your closing. And with your closing, be sure you thank the recipient, and then your signature, use your first and last name with a salutation. So take a look. Advance the slide, please. Here's a sample email. So go ahead, take a look at this. So let's walk through this piece by piece. The first thing I said was the subject line. Do they use an appropriate subject line? Well, this was a mixer scenario and it says mixer follow-up. So that should be a very good clue as to what this is about. Secondly, the greeting, Dear Professor Java. Are they using the title correctly? Professor is a good title if you know they are a professor. If you're unclear as to whether they may have a doctorate or not, professor is a good way to go about that. Then looking at the introduction, we find the first and last name of our student, class standing, their major, and the purpose for connecting. Cindy is a senior studying mechanical engineering. We met at the research mixer. The reason for contacting, follow up on our conversation. And then she also talks about attaching a letter and the desire to work together. Okay. Notice that after she stated what it is she wants, she includes a line, thank you for your consideration, and I look forward to your response. That's very important because you don't want to leave your email empty in terms of hanging there. Because if she didn't include that last part, it's unclear that she is expecting a response back from Professor Java. Right now, she has given all the information to the professor and has indicated that she's expecting a response back. Okay, that will give her time to let the professor react. And then within 5 to 7 days, if they do not, then it's fine for her to follow up again. Okay, but this is making it clear that the expectation is, here's my information. I look forward to hearing from you. Notice also then at the end, she signs it with her first and last name, a telephone number that works, as well as an appropriate email address. Okay. So that's a good sample of a way to go about that should you have a situation that is similar. So then what if you need to send a letter? Same thing. Notice how she did it. State letter is attached and the purpose. For example, please find attached a letter regarding my desire to work with you during the upcoming academic year, as well as my CV. The challenge is oftentimes people will want to write half of their letter in the email and then attach it as well. And we don't need it to be duplicated, okay? Either we need to read what's in the email or we need to read your letter. But if you start duplicating a lot, what happens is we'll start to tune out. And you don't want that to happen, okay? So if it's short and you can put it in the email, that would be fine. But typically something like a letter is going to be lengthy, and you don't want to send a long email that is lengthy because that's not going to get their attention. Okay. Next slide, please. Couple tips, be sure you proofread it. Be formal, concise, and specific, okay? Avoid all the things we use in our social worlds, like uppercase, bold, underline, italicized, emojis. And if you're getting an email, please respond promptly. It's usually best to respond within 48 hours if you can. And I don't mean weekend time, I mean normal work week time. And if you have sent a request to somebody and they haven't responded within 5 to 7 business days, then it's totally appropriate to send a follow-up. Next slide. So with that, we'll segue into time management. So knowing that we have great opportunities here, we need to think about what kinds of things we need to be doing to manage our time. So first of all, just be aware of your time. Do a time check. How do you spend your time every day? What are the tasks that take up your time, and what are the tasks that are stealing your time? For example, you might be spending an hour on email instead of actually working on important work projects. Or you may have a lot of desktop notifications set for your computer that continually distract you throughout the day and end up eating a lot of your time because you're not focused on the task at hand. Okay? So first thing you need to do is assess your time and how you're using it. Secondly, set a time limit. We all know what it's like to have huge projects in front of us, but we can't sit down and spend 14 hours sitting at a computer. Not only is that bad for our mental thinking processes, it's bad for your body. You've got to get up and move around. And that's a real danger that we're in right now with COVID. We don't have all the interaction that we used to, like parking in the parking lot, walking to our office, walking to somebody else's office for a meeting, etc. So we've got to be cautious of how much time we actually sit down and how much time we're devoting to a task. Think about software tools. There are a lot of apps that are available now that can help you manage your time. And some of them may be very useful for monitoring and assessing your daily progress. So if that's an avenue that works for you, you might want to check it out. Next slide. A to-do list. Successful people have goals, and they're really just little mini goals. If you create a to-do list, you don't have to wonder about the things you need to get done. You know exactly what you need to do, and it keeps you focused and organized. Plan ahead. Make sure you are thinking about the long term. It's very easy, especially right now, to just think, okay, I have to get next week this big exam and then I'm all done. And then we forget that following that, there will be finals. There are some papers thrown in there. So don't lose track of the big picture as well. One of the things I do is I have just a giant wall calendar, and on it, I write down major things that are happening. That way I can always refer to it and look at it and understand, oh yes, next week I've got that, but right behind that the following week, I've also got a major event right here that I need to be focused on. So it helps me look at it big picture and little picture. And then be sure you prioritize. You have to think about when things need to happen. Does it need to be done now? Does it need to be later? But with prioritizing, you need to think about that also on a daily basis. For example, I know when I first get to the office in the morning, the things that I need to do are the ones that are going to demand the most attention from me. They're going to take a lot of my cognitive resources because I need to think carefully about them. I'm fresh, ready to go, so that works for me. I know other people come in and they need to kind of break into their day. And then later on, midday is when they like to focus on those really heavy tasks and things that need to be done. So be aware of who you are and how your body works and how you function, and then set your schedule around that so that you can use your time most effectively. Moving on, thank you. Focus. It's very easy to believe that in this day and age that we can do all sorts of things at once, but we can't. When we do that, when we claim we multitask, we're really using a lot of our vital energy and cognitive resources. So it's important to focus on what you need to do to get finished. Okay? Think, what are the things that will distract you? How can you really spend 1 hour focused on this one task without being diverted? And see what the payoff will be. Build your schedule appropriately, as I talked about. If 1 o'clock is the time of day when you just turn into a slug, then make sure you're doing tasks at 1 o'clock that are not good, that would match that to you. And then finally, perfection. And this is a hard one, because especially where you're at in grad college, you can't beat yourself up. Yes, you want to do well. Yes, you are trying very hard to do a lot. You're also in a situation where you're probably not feeling overly confident with money and having a lot to do the things you want to do. And so then that just makes you feel like you have to do even better with your writing and your research and all those types of things. But don't beat yourself up. Don't overanalyze. Take it all with a grain of salt. Remember, you need to know when it is you need to stop and not to beat yourself up. Next slide. So with that, let's talk about meeting and interview preparedness. First of all, when you're asked or invited to something, always be sure you respond. Even if, and let's just talk very generally, if you're invited to an event and it gives you the option to RSVP, it's appropriate social protocol to respond and say, unfortunately, I'm not able to attend. Second of all, when you're trying to go somewhere important, such as an interview, make sure you know where it is you are going and you give yourself enough time. I always make sure that I know exactly the room I am going to. For example, I'll do a dry run and I try to do it at a very similar time of day. If you have an 8 a.m. interview on Monday, You don't want to do a dry run at 5 p.m. on Sunday because the traffic is different, the buildings may be locked, everything is different. So try to do it in a similar type of time frame. Once I find where it is I need to go, and I don't mean just finding the building, because buildings are extremely confusing. I mean, I walk myself to the actual room and do everything but go into it. And then that takes all that pressure off me, because you do not want to give yourself any additional pressure when you're trying to get to something like an interview. So I know exactly where I'm going. The day of, I have allotted myself extra time because who knows, the interstate may be shut down, there may be a car accident, traffic may be diverted, whatever may happen. But when I did my dry run, I found a place where I can hang out. Now, that's a little bit more challenging right now, but we know that the pandemic will end at some point, and we will go back to some type of normalcy. So what I've typically done is once I know where I'm going, I find the coffee shop that is nearby the day of. I give myself plenty of time. I arrive where I need to be in plenty of time, and then I head over to the coffee shop. I know I can review my notes if I want to, but oftentimes I don't. I get myself something to drink and I sit down and I just let myself kind of mentally prepare. I may be running through some of the notes in my head, but it's just to get myself in a place where I can really get focused and think about who I am, what I'm doing, to really let my best self shine forward. Make sure you're aware of current events and what is going on in the world. Because once you walk over to your interview spot, oftentimes there's going to be a waiting room or a lobby, and likely somebody who works there, is going to hit you up for a little bit of conversation. And you want to be sure you have something to say. Being abreast of current events is a good way to be able to automatically have something to say. But I will preface it with this, especially right now. There's a lot of tension in the world. And so be very careful about kind of what you would say regarding current events. Particularly, don't say things where you clearly are taking a side, because you don't know the culture, you don't know the people, you don't know the intricacies. So try to keep it as neutral as possible. So for example, if somebody said, as you're sitting there waiting for your interview in the next 3 minutes, and somebody that works there walks by and said, "Oh, hey, what did you think of the debate last night?" How are you going to respond? I would be very careful about giving any type of strong opinion or opinion in general, and stick to something that is pretty neutral, such as, "I thought it was better than the first debate." Like, you're not taking sides. You're commenting on it to show that obviously you are plugged in and kind of know what's going on. And then the second thing would be have something to naturally divert the conversation. Okay? I'm not going to ask them, "So what did you think of the debate?" I'm going to say, "Are you someone that works here, and what is your role?" And then that gives them the opportunity to kind of take the stage and takes the pressure off of me. Okay. Continue on to the next one. If this is an interview or a presentation, make sure you know your presentation inside out. Okay? This means you have to practice. And you're very fortunate in this day and age. I can tell you, when I was doing my student teaching, I used to have to set up a camcorder on top of boxes in the back of the room to record myself. We have come so far with technology, and there's a lot you can do. You need to do a practice interview or presentation, and you need to record yourself. You're going to be amazed to see what kind of gestures you're doing, your facial expression as you're presenting, things that you say like or yes, or I know, or okay, let's move on. There are all sorts of nuances. And to be honest, it takes a lot of courage to watch yourself. But it is a very valuable exercise. So I encourage you to do that. And if you're not interested in recording yourself, do it in front of a mirror, because that is hard to watch yourself in real time as you're going on. But it will pay dividends. It is worth it in the long run. Be sure that you conduct yourself professionally. Carry your materials if you're taking materials, or your laptop or tablet. Put it in a padfolio or a bag so that you look very professional and polished. And if you need to have copies of a portfolio or your resume, be sure that you have extras with you so that you can pass them out quickly. Next slide. Lastly, just kind of think about yourself. Look at your posture, your smile. Be sure you make eye contact, have a greeting ready. And while we used to shake hands, I would not recommend that by any means right now. That is the standard protocol in the United States. So we'll see about that one. Okay, but check yourself. Make sure that you are looking the part that you need to be. Make sure that you are able to make eye contact. And typically you want to make eye contact 40 to 60% of the time while you're giving a presentation or talking to them. And be aware of how you're going to greet people. You don't just want to walk in and be like, hi, okay, good afternoon, good morning, how do you do, etc. Next slide. Next slide. There we go. As I said, eye contact is vital. Make sure you have an effective introduction, and make sure your phone is away. Your phone is not your watch. And I admit that's a bad habit for me too, as I've stopped wearing a watch and I have to pull it out all the time to check the time. But when you're elsewhere, people don't know that you're checking the time. If you're sitting there and you look at your phone, my thought is, oh, they're too distracted to pay attention to what I have to tell them. So put the phone away, shut it off if you can, whatever you need to do, and don't use it as your clock. All right, with that, that concludes my portion. I'm kind of getting you ready to get out there and do what you need to do. And at this point, do I take questions, or can I go ahead and turn it over to Lisa?
Hey, if anyone has any questions, we can take those now while I share my screen for the next presentation. Please feel free to chat, or you can even unmute yourself and ask Kyle any questions. All right, I don't see any questions in the chat. Oh, actually somebody did. Do you have any tips for virtual interviews?
Yes, similar in that I would say the same thing, practice. And when I say practice, don't just practice your delivery, but if you're going to have a PowerPoint or anything like that, you need to practice it as well. This is a great example. When we decided to have this run through the graduate college, instead of me sharing my screen, I didn't realize, but all of a sudden I had a great complication with having to continually say, advance the slide, advance the slide. And that's something I could have realized had I practiced this more all the way through. Instead of me just sitting at my desk practicing individually, if I would have put it up onto a platform where I had to watch myself and go through it, that would have helped immensely. So set up a fake, not a fake one, but I mean set up a meeting request on your calendar, log in with another device, and do it that way. And make sure you can run everything the way it needs to be run.
Looks like we have another question in the chat. What if company culture isn't formal, such as company emails from leadership where their response to you is hey or hello? Should you mirror them and respond back the same way, or do you communicate in a formalized manner?
So I would say it depends a little bit on where we are with that company. So if you are having your initial correspondence, I would err a little bit more on the more formal side rather than just going totally informal. But if you've established a connection there and you know that's the way that they interact, then I would follow suit and continue in that fashion.
Thank you. So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Lisa Davis to present her part. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Nevada. I also wanted to pitch. I love the information that you had, Kyle, but we have some great resources also on campus through our career services office campus-wide, and some of the individual colleges have campus career offices too. So they do have a lot of resources. I would definitely look at that. And another thing that I noticed, we have LinkedIn Learning that students can also engage in to find out a little bit more about that. We have great resources for students on campus, so I wanted to throw that out there as well. So what I'm going to talk a little bit about is developing your elevator pitch and networking tips, and I wanted to start off just with a scenario. So you're at a mixer, and there's someone that you want to meet, and you haven't had a chance to, and you end up in the elevator with that person. Do you know what you're going to say to that person when you're on the elevator? That's what the elevator pitch is designed for. It's just a short piece of information about you, your company, your product that you can use from going on the 13th floor to the 15th floor of an elevator. So it's about a 13-second commercial about you. And that's what we're going to talk about. People do that also on their product if they're pitching some type of product or a company. I have one that I'm going to kind of disclose a little bit later on mine and how I use mine. But you are the product, and you are selling this product to people who don't know you. So you want to give them enough information, especially if you're on the elevator with that person that might make that hiring decision for the company that you really want to work in. You want them to be able to remember who you are. And also the mixer example that Kyle included with that email, if you had an elevator pitch at that mixer and it kind of tied in with the letter, that person that the letter was Professor Java, he may remember Cindy a little bit more from that elevator pitch because it's also kind of tied to that email that was sent as well. So in your elevator pitch as students, you'll want to have your name, the year in school, if you're in, for example, the Lee Business School, and your major. So my name is Lisa Davis. I'm a senior in the Lee Business School, and I'm studying accounting. Where you've been, your accomplishments, jobs, maybe you're part of the accounting fraternity, or you're involved with American Marketing Association, or you've won an award for something. That's another thing you could include. I'm on the board of the Student American Marketing Association. Where are you going? Employment internship goal. So are you interested in working for marketing? You could say, I've enjoyed all of my marketing courses, and I'm looking to obtain an internship within that area. So you have a few pieces of information about you, your background, and what you're looking for that they'll be able to go on. And it also is a conversation starter. So when you're developing your elevator pitch, you'll want to write it out, but don't memorize it. Because if you write it out and memorize it, you're not going to be able to adapt it to your audience or your environment. So something that you're going to use your elevator pitch for a conversation in the hallway may be very different than if you're using it at a recruiting event. So you want to be able to keep it available to modify and adapt to the environment. And a lot of the time, you may not be able to do your whole elevator pitch, but you have all those pieces of it that will help you create dialogue with someone that you met, possibly at a mixer, in the elevator. It gives you a lot of background information about you, so you're not caught off guard. And it does help it helps you with that conversation with other individuals. And again, you want to adapt to your audience, so you don't want to memorize it, but you want it to have the basics that you can modify depending on who you're speaking with. So I wanted to give you my brief elevator pitch that I have written down. So my name is Lisa Davis, and I'm currently the Associate Director for the Lee MBA program. I have the privilege to work with some amazing up-and-coming business leaders by guiding them through the MBA experience. And for that elevator speech, you'll definitely want to practice. So that was my quick elevator pitch, just a generic one. I don't have it memorized, but it's the nuts and bolts of who I am and what I do. Now, I have a couple of examples of when you can use your elevator pitch and what I use my elevator pitch for. It could be if I'm working with a student that may be interested in the MBA program. I don't know. I'm in a mixer and I'm talking to someone and I introduce myself that I work with MBA program. I work with the MBA program. And a lot of the time I will get, oh, I know somebody who's in that program, or, oh, I've been thinking about getting an MBA. So it kind of started that dialogue. The other thing that I can use with the same elevator pitch, but then adapt it to the audience, is if I'm speaking with someone that may be interested in hiring one of our MBAs. So I can use that elevator pitch as a start, and then we can have more dialogue about them possibly hiring some of our MBA students. So in your case, for job searching, you could use the pitch at job fairs, career expos, online, include it in your LinkedIn summary. You can really make your LinkedIn summary personal, the little bio part. You can use it to introduce yourself at networking events. And again, practice, practice, practice. The more you do it and get out and talk to people, the better. Job interviews. I think this also helps. A lot of the time you'll be asked that question, tell me about yourself. So if you have this information kind of written up and you can expand on that elevator pitch to give them a little bit more information about who you are in that interview. So there's several elements for the elevator pitch. The first, the verbal elements. Pronunciation and enunciation. You want to make sure that they can understand the words that are coming out of your mouth. If they can't understand the words, it's over. You're just not able to hear. One of the things I've noticed with a few events that I have been to, it is really difficult to do this with a mask on. It's harder to hear individuals, so you'll have to speak up a lot more. And that's where the projection comes into play as well. You want people to hear you. And if we're in an environment right now where everyone's wearing masks, you're going to need to project a little bit more. And it's more about the power of your voice comes from projection versus the volume. So that's something to work on as well. Cadence, you want to vary the speed of the delivery. So that makes it also more interesting for the person that you're communicating with. And one thing I think that's really difficult in speaking is being okay with a pause. A lot of the time, I know Kyle mentioned it, there's the filler words, the the like, the so. We're very used to putting those in there instead of appreciating the silence of the pause. So getting comfortable with the silence is important. Pausing at the right moment is good as well. Also with your elevator pitch and also presentation in general, nonverbal elements, your eye contact. And this is also in the virtual space, kind of what you're doing in your square. Looking someone in the eyes is perceived as being honest and sincere. So having that contact with individuals when you are presenting your elevator pitch does make a difference. Another thing for me in presenting or in your elevator pitch is a smile. It is definitely universal, and most people know what the meaning of that smile is. It can put your audience at ease. Gestures, they should be natural and in sync with your message. There's a lot of information about what your hands say when you're presenting or when you're doing your elevator speech. So you may want to look at those. I didn't include anything in there. But if you look at some of the information about the different hand gestures and then what they mean, you can adapt those hand gestures to what you're displaying or doing in your presentation. Kind of to support your verbal message with your nonverbal. And then another one is posture, standing up straight. It shows confidence and authority. So those are some of the nonverbals in your elevator pitch, and it's also important in presenting and in networking as well. So I'm going to transition a little bit over to networking. Now you have your elevator pitch to where you can kind of take that information about you and then kind of put it to action in a networking situation. One of our MBA grads had said to me, and I thought this was great, it's that your network is your net worth. So connecting with others is so important for so many reasons. One, you develop a great group of people that you can bounce ideas off of. It develops a network of people that may be in very different roles than you have. So you kind of broaden that expertise. But another thing, and a very important thing, is networking. If you look at how many jobs are actually based on just the job posting, replying to a job post versus referrals, 70 to 90% of all jobs are not posted. So that's quite a bit. Networking does make a difference. I know for our MBA students, we have had students that have worked with other students on projects, and they have recommended those students for positions within their company or written recommendations for them. So again, that network is your net worth. It can really help you along the way. You never know where that next opportunity will come from. So there's a lot of different types of networking. I think more so now we're seeing online networking. We're doing an event this evening with our MBA students. We're doing a trivia night, which is kind of a little bit of online networking and competition. LinkedIn and Twitter. So we seem to be more in that online space. I think the face-to-face network we will see when we get back to a new normal. And you can use the elevator pitch to start networking with other people. And I think one thing that I attempt to do when I go to a networking event, when I talk to people, is when we start talking, develop some common threads. I like to travel. I have a cat. I had a Rhodesian Ridgeback. So I'm looking for all the different things, the different ways that we can kind of connect and build that relationship. And the other thing, general networking, friends and family for professional contacts. Definitely expand your network, especially when you're a student. Informational interviewing is a great way to get to learn more about the different areas that you may be interested in going to work for. So I would recommend doing that. That allows you to establish relationships with individuals in areas that you might be interested in working in. But it's also not something you're going in to ask for a job. You're asking them more of their expertise and their background and following up with them. That's a great way to build your network as a student. And when you're doing that, even in the online space, business attire is important. So professional dress, blue, gray, and black. I really prefer black. I'm trying to add a little bit more color to my wardrobe. Business casual, more color, jacket or no jacket. And you want to cater to events. I know someone mentioned about the company culture on email. It's the same thing in company culture. You want to probably dress a little bit better than you would expect. So I would err on the side of dressing better than dressing less for an event. So if it's business casual, maybe business casual or business. You definitely want to dress for the position you want, and that does make a difference. So here's some examples of those. So examples of networking, and I did add some information. What I really like to do is establish a connection. Maybe we went to the same school. We know someone, we've worked with someone. For me, a lot of it's the MBA. I get to talk to people and they usually know someone that's have an MBA or they have an MBA themselves. But finding out what they majored in, how they became interested in their field. And these are great questions too, if you're doing an informational interview with someone. Tell me about your current position and describe a typical workday. Not all jobs are different. It gives you an opportunity to learn about a field you may be interested in, or even one after you learn a little bit more, maybe you're not so interested in. So it does give you an opportunity to connect with that person and learn a little bit more. And what advice would you give someone just starting in this business? I think as a student, you have a benefit of being a student. You can ask a lot of those questions, and a lot of people in business are really willing to help you with a lot of the information to help you get started. And I think that's a definite advantage that you have as a student in networking. Couple of networking mistakes. Name dropping. You definitely don't want to name drop unless you know how that contact feels about that person. You don't want to ask a person directly about a job. You don't want to ask about salary or money, or talk, a big one, never talk bad about a former employer or anyone. To stay out of that negative space and keep it in a positive space always is a much better way to be perceived. And not appreciating your partner's time. So that's important as well. We have limited amount of time, appreciating the time that that person has spent with us. I think is a great way to do on networking. Networking mistakes, definitely want to stay away from those. Following up, I know Kyle had done the email to Professor Java. It was a follow-up. You can follow up with a phone call, add them on LinkedIn. I've actually been in networking events where I've talked with someone and we actually connected on LinkedIn right there. And I followed up with a LinkedIn message when I got back to my office. And follow through. If you talk to someone and you let them know you were going to do something, follow through on what you said. Another one that I didn't mention that I think is important, if you're at a networking event and you've talked to several people and you find out that this person maybe does media buying and you have this other person that maybe has a similar interest, making that connection with those two people that you met is also a nice way to expand your network. And also it's a giving gesture to connect people. That's one of the favorite things I like to do, is to kind of connect people and kind of establish those relationships. I'll write down information on business cards. When I get a business card, which I haven't for probably 6 months, I like to write down on the back of that business card where I met that person, if they were interested in the MBA, if they were interested in hiring the MBA, if they had a Rhodesian Ridgeback dog, whatever it was, put my little notes on the back of that business card so that I can remember that person. And another thing that I do, because I'm not very good with names, is I make sure I relate the name with the person's face, and I say it several times. So next time I see that person, hopefully I will remember that person's name, which is something that I have struggled with for very many years. And then stay in touch with people in the industry. I think that's important as well. So again, your network is your net worth. And kind of being able to connect with people is really important in the virtual space as well. So when you're in your classes, connecting with your classmates, it's just a great way to really get to know other people.
All right, thank you so much, Lisa. Does anyone have any questions for our speakers? So I have a question here in the chat. Is it a good idea to add my coworkers to my social networking sites? I know you touched up a little on LinkedIn, but can you address any of the other ones?
For me, I think it depends. In my class, what the students are doing is they're actually Googling themselves to find out what kind of online presence they have. I think that's important. And I think it depends on what you share. I tend to keep my Facebook I do connect with other people on Facebook, but it's family, travel. I keep my, like Kyle had mentioned, political opinions off of my Facebook. So it depends on what you share. I have a tendency to connect with those people, but I also really restrict the type of things I share. I think LinkedIn, because it is professional, I think that's really the one you should connect with your coworkers and people in the professional space on. Do you have additional information on that, Kyle? Your opinion?
I completely agree with you, Lisa. I think we have to be very cognizant of we are leaving a digital footprint, even if we may not see it. We don't know in the future what technology may be there that people can go back and look. And so I keep things very separate. LinkedIn is my professional network, and then things like Instagram or Facebook are social. But I'm very limited with my use on them, and I certainly don't put people that I work with on those.
I know I had a student last semester that she said when she was looking at her online presence and her digital footprint that she had a MySpace page that came up from when she was in high school. And she was very disappointed that this showed up on her because she was getting ready to graduate. She was not very happy that her MySpace page from high school was there. So yeah, it doesn't go away. You want to be really cautious on what you post.
You do, and for me, this is a big concern because I have a toddler, and I'm worried about creating an identity for him. And that's the exact thing that I think about is if he goes for an interview when he's 18, and somebody is able to pull up, embarrassing baby photos of him or something. I have to be very cautious and think through what am I doing and how may this impact me down the road. So just something to keep in mind.
Thank you both. I'll have to go back and check out my MySpace page, make sure it's not there anymore. Can you provide us some tips on if we're on a phone call with somebody and the conversation is getting kind of lengthy, how do we respectfully and professionally wrap that up?
That's a tough one. I do two things. Usually somebody from the other room knows that I've been on that phone call and will come in and let me know I have somebody in the office. That's one way. That's a good one. I've had to do it, but I don't do it very often. Do you have one on that, Kyle?
I agree. That is a tough one. So usually what I do is try to make some sort of noise and then interject myself and say, oh, I'm really sorry, but I've got another phone call, another meeting, or something of that nature. I'm going to have to go. I make the noise because I feel like it helps kind of break up their train of thought a bit and kind of cues them in that something's going on. It just makes me feel better.
Yeah, I've done the meeting one. I've got to go to another meeting. But I haven't tried the noise. That's a good idea. I think I will incorporate that one as well.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else have any questions for our presenters?
While they're thinking of that, I did want to go back to the question about virtual interviews because, I was thinking very interview minded, but think of the world we're in right now. So first of all, make sure your background is appropriate. Sometimes I have meetings and I see people's kitchens and things going on in the background. So if it's an interview, find yourself a spot that suits you well. Be aware of any pets that you may have. Is it going to be okay if a cat walks across the screen in the middle of your interview? Or if dogs are barking? Be aware of the lighting. You don't want to be, a real dark screen where people can't see you or vice versa. So be aware of what you look like on the other side. We talked about screen share, making sure that all works, and then making sure your microphone and your sound are working well. And if you have any complications with those, trying to address those ahead of time. Because you're going to be focused on what it is you're trying to relay in terms of content. You don't want to let all the background technical stuff get in your way as well.
And I want to add with the lighting, I did see a presentation not too long ago where the person did have glasses on and there was a glare off of the one side. One side of his face was dark, but the other side, you couldn't see the eyes at all because of the way the lighting was. So I think lighting and the camera position.
Right.
I've seen, for me, my camera, I usually have directly in front, but I have seen people where they're looking down and I'm looking up at the ceiling. So the angle of the camera lens, I think, does make a difference as well in online interviewing.
Thank you both. I always like to log in a few minutes early just to make sure my camera is right and my sound check is good. So if you have the time to do that, WebEx always lets you preview your camera and just to see what the angle looks like. So that might be helpful before you interview. So it looks like we don't have any more questions in the chat, but before we wrap it up, I just want to give a huge thank you to both Lisa and Kyle for sharing your time with us today. This was super informative and very important, whether we're using these tips in our academic career while we're students or when we transition over into the professional world. So thank you both so much. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day. and we'll see you at our next workshop. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bev, bye.